Hello, students of United States history, 1865 to the present. Professor Berninger coming at you. Got to keep the learning rolling. We missed our class this week because of a snow day, and who knows, we might have more ahead. So we got to keep the ball rolling. So I'm going to narrate a little PowerPoint slideshow for you here. I really cannot say how much I enjoyed reading your discussion board posts about what struck you as interesting in the chapter, and we're going to keep that going because I was like, "Whoa, this is really cool." You guys were so honest, saying what you knew, what you didn't know, and man, I can't tell you how much I've learned preparing for this class, reading this really pretty good text. I think that we have worth the price anyway. It's free. And hey, if you listen to me, if you ever want to really learn something, try to teach it because you really need to know it. So I'm learning a lot, learning right alongside of you here. So anyway, here goes Reconstruction. My thoughts on Reconstruction. It's as important as studying what the heck happened in the Civil War. So ever since the Civil War gets all kinds of documentaries. One of the most watched history documentary came out in the early 90s, Ken Burns' The Civil War. It was on for 4 or 5 nights, one week on PBS, and something like 25% of the country was watching it. That's crazy ratings for PBS and a historical documentary. And he did a lot with race. It was an excellent documentary. But still, when people study the Civil War, they get into battles, they get into Lee and Grant and tactics, and they throw in their black soldiers, which is good, right? And, the South was fighting for slavery, the North fighting to keep the Union. But it seems like Civil War studies is just all about white Northerners and white Southerners fighting each other. For years, what the slogan of the Civil War for years, brother fighting brother. Well, and we're not talking about black brothers here. We're talking about white brothers is what people have in mind. No black brothers were fighting each other during the Civil War. By the way, 180,000 African American men fought on the side of the Union. And that's pretty wild stuff. And pretty good movie was made about that called Glory. And you can see how they were sent into very dangerous situations that maybe white troops wouldn't have been. Anyway, I digress. So, my point, my thinking this week, as I've been thinking about all of this, studying Reconstruction, this is a hot take, studying Reconstruction is more important, as important, at least, if not more, than the Civil War. And it has been grossly understudied because if you see the Civil War as some sort of opportunity for a reset button on America, then you can see Reconstruction as a good start towards restarting America, moving towards all men are created equal, and then it crashes and burns after about 10 years. And right up to today, we've been suffering the consequences of it. So I think one of the most important things, if not the most, we're going to study this semester is Reconstruction, how what America could have been and how much further along we could be in race relations if it had gone better. And also, hey, it could have gone a lot worse. It could have gone even worse than it did, okay? So here's a picture, emancipation. It's interesting when I started Googling images for something to put up here right away. I found images of a white general sort of holding Southerners back and protecting African Americans. Yeah, I passed that over because it didn't put African Americans at the center of things. It still put a white guy at the center of things. And African Americans are at the center of Reconstruction. And I like this image a little bit better. And it addresses something you brought up in your discussion board posts. Many of you were surprised to find out that Abraham Lincoln's famous Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 that freed the slaves, thank you, Abraham Lincoln, left 700,000 people enslaved in states that had not joined the Confederacy. It only applied to the Confederacy. And guess what? The Confederacy did not care about what Abraham Lincoln was proclaiming. So how many slaves did the Emancipation Proclamation, hello? How many slaves did the Emancipation Proclamation free? That would be 0, okay? Z-E-R-O. However, it gave African Americans in the South, enslaved people, hope, right? Hope, and it did prompt them to run north. And so it was very important, and it's not to be understated. However, you need to know it freed 0 people from slavery and left many people in northern states enslaved, states that had not outlawed it. New York essentially outlawed slavery in 1827, but the Hudson Valley had many, many enslaved people. So Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Yes, sort of. Like most things in history, yeah, sort of, right? Appomattox Courthouse. Oh, look at those nice people. That would be me and my lovely wife. And a couple years ago, we visited the town of Appomattox Courthouse. That's the name of the town. It's a National Historical Park, and many of the original buildings are there. And that is the place where Grant and Lee, General Grant, the head of the Union Army, and Lee, the head of the Southern Army, the Army of Northern Virginia, met, and they made peace. And you can go to this room, and it's a very, very interesting place. By the way, I like that slide of my wife and me. My wife's from the state of Georgia. So, for that part, I'm glad the North and South got back together again, because I wouldn't have met her. But it was kind of neat to be there with my Southern wife. She's very happy, by the way, living up here. So General Grant, General Lee get together. They sign the peace. The Civil War's ends lovely. However, what was going on in their minds, right? General Lee over here, always so well dressed and handsome and worshipped by Southerners then, now, sadly, maybe forever. In his mind, it's like, well, we lost the war. We'll rejoin the Union, but we might not have slavery, maybe not, but what the heck, we'll just, no big deal. The South will continue as is. He did not imagine giving up an entire way of life, which the South had to. And General Grant and the Northerners had slightly different ideas for what the South would be. Of course, Grant becomes president. So the war ends, lovely. And then not that long after, at Ford's Theater, which is another place I visited, and it's in Washington, D.C. John Wilkes Booth, right here, very famous actor. His brother is one of the best actors in American history. Shoots Abraham Lincoln in the back of the head, jumps off the balcony and yells, "Sic semper tyrannis," probably yelled that. And what finally prompted Booth to kill Lincoln was Abraham Lincoln talking about black men having the right to vote. And that put Booth over the edge and killed Lincoln. Now, a lot of you in your discussion board posts wrote, oh, if Lincoln hadn't been shot, how much better things would have been. Because Andrew Johnson is terrible. Historians have spent a lot of time pondering and thinking about if Lincoln had not been shot, how would things have been different. It's hard to say. I think it's an overstatement to say, oh, everything would have been wonderful, okay? I think it's an overstatement to say if only Lincoln had lived, we would have had racial harmony in America from that day forward. Changing a culture is extremely difficult. Changing a slaveocracy, a slave culture in the South, and basically a very racist culture in the North. People weren't angels in the North. So, a president can't do that. Presidents can tap into cultures and bring them out, but to radically change a culture is hard. So I don't think we should overstate that things would have been so much better had Lincoln lived. However, they certainly would have been much better, and it would have been less traumatic to try to do things right. Um, well, then the sort of the villain the villain of our story, Andrew Johnson, becomes president. And a lot of you were like, what? What? Why does Abraham Lincoln have this guy as his vice president? Abraham Lincoln's awesome. We've got President's Day coming up. Abraham Lincoln was, not at all racist. He was a little racist. All people were then. But he evolved. His views evolved as views should over time in the right direction. What's he doing with this guy? Well, Andrew Johnson was a Southerner, and he was a Southerner, a Democrat who believed that the South should not secede. And Abraham Lincoln wanted to show the North and the South that after the Civil War, we were going to put it all back together. And what better way to send a message than to have Andrew Johnson be vice president. By the way, Abraham Lincoln's first vice president was Hannibal Hamlin, and he spent most of the Civil War in the Coast Guard. He wasn't around much. The idea that vice presidents are important is very new, It actually started with Bill Clinton's vice president. Al Gore was a big part of the administration. George Bush, the second Bush, Dick Cheney was a big part of his administration. Joe Biden was a big part of Obama's administration. And I think Mike Pence was a big part of the Trump administration. That's a new thing. We're living in the golden era of the vice president. How about that? So it really was not that big a deal to have Johnson there. Vice presidents did not run for president, and only one had become president when William Henry Harrison died. So anyway, Lincoln's shot, boom, and Andrew Johnson becomes president. And people in Lincoln's cabinet did not like that Johnson was president, especially the Republicans in Lincoln's cabinet. And Johnson wanted to get rid of them. So the United States Congress passes a law that Johnson can't fire cabinet members. It's really not a good law, and it was overturned by the Supreme Court a few decades later. And nowadays, presidents can fire cabinet members and get rid of them as they like. So the idea of Congress controlling the cabinet and barring them from being fired is probably not a good idea. But at any rate, he got rid of Stanton, Lincoln's Secretary of War. Today we call it Secretary of Defense. And the United States House of Representatives voted to impeach him. Then the Senate, you know how impeachment works? We're in the middle of an impeachment right now. Pay attention, people. Pay attention to your government. Andrew Johnson was impeached by the House of Representatives. Right? Our representative today in Columbia Greene County is Antonio Delgado. And then after being impeached, the Senate, U.S. Senate, each state has 2 senators. We have Senators Schumer and Gillibrand. The Senate then has a trial where they might convict the president and have the president removed from office, or not convict and the president just stays in office. So Andrew Johnson is impeached. The Senate trial, they fall 1 vote short of convicting him. So he stays on as president. Bill Clinton then, in the 1990s, a long time past, was impeached. Basically, he got oral sex from an intern in the White House and then lied about it under oath. And then President Trump was impeached for possible foreign election interference. And he got impeached again for inciting insurrection and is going to trial in the Senate next week. So